Okay, so today we're going to take a deep dive into something I think we can all relate to. Conquering procrastination. You know how it is. We've all been there.
Absolutely. It's a universal struggle, and it's one that's actually gotten a lot of attention from researchers. There's a ton of really interesting science behind why we procrastinate.
Right. And so today we're going to unpack that, see what the research says, and more importantly, see what we can all do about it.
Yeah, the goal is to give everyone some actionable strategies, not just theory.
Exactly. So let's set the stage. First things first, how do the experts actually define procrastination? It feels like more than just bad time management, right?
It definitely is. So technically, procrastination is defined as the voluntary delay of an intended action, even though you know there are going to be negative consequences.
So it's like consciously choosing short-term comfort over long-term goals.
Pretty much. And the stats are pretty crazy. Research shows that something like 80 to 95% of students admit to procrastinating. And for adults, it's around 75%, with almost half of those folks saying it causes significant problems for them.
So this is a big deal, and we're not just talking about missing a deadline here and there. What kind of impact does this actually have on people?
Well beyond just productivity, procrastination really takes a toll on well-being. It's linked to higher levels of stress, anxiety, guilt, even lower self-esteem.
Makes sense. All those negative feelings of, ugh, I should be doing this.
Exactly. And it goes even deeper than that. Studies have found a correlation with poorer mental and physical health outcomes. Things like depression, sleep issues, even increased susceptibility to physical illnesses.
Really? So it's affecting our bodies, too.
It seems so. Plus, academically, it correlates with lower grades, and it makes it so much harder to reach those big long-term goals we set for ourselves.
So this deep dive isn't just about getting things done faster. It's about actually improving our lives.
Definitely. It's holistic.
I like that. Okay, so let's get into the why. What's going on in our brains that makes us procrastinate?
Right. So there are several key psychological factors at play. One of the biggest ones is what's called present bias.
Present bias?
Yeah, it's this tendency our brains have to value immediate rewards way more than future rewards. It's like instant gratification trumps everything.
It's so true. I can totally relate to that.
And it's not a new concept either. Like even ancient Greek philosophers wrote about this struggle with delayed gratification.
Really?
Yeah, it's a human thing. And there's a really famous study, the Stanford marshmallow experiment, that perfectly illustrates this. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Oh, yeah, the kids with the marshmallows.
Exactly. And it shows how strong that pull for immediate gratification can be. And basically, that's what procrastination is all about, right? That immediate discomfort of starting a task feels so much bigger than the potential reward way down the line.
Makes totally sense. What else is going on?
Well, fear of failure is a biggie. A lot of times we procrastinate because we're scared of messing up or not living up to some kind of expectation.
Right. Avoid the task, avoid the potential failure.
Exactly. And perfectionism kind of feeds into that too. That need for everything to be flawless can be paralyzing. So we just end up putting things off indefinitely.
It's like we set the bar so high that it becomes impossible to even start.
Exactly. And there's a big emotional component to procrastination as well. Often we put things off because the task itself brings up negative feelings.
Like dread or anxiety or just plain boredom.
Exactly. So we procrastinate to avoid those uncomfortable feelings, even if it just gives us temporary relief.
So it's like we're choosing to feel good now over making progress later.
Yeah, and that can become a vicious cycle, right? You procrastinate to avoid the negative emotions, but then you end up feeling even more stressed and guilty later.
Definitely a trap. It also feels like self-control plays a role here, right?
Oh, absolutely. You can view procrastination as a failure of self-regulation. It's that struggle to prioritize your long-term goals over those immediate desires and impulses.
So how do we get better at that? At actually resisting that urge to procrastinate? What are some practical strategies?
Okay, well, the research has a lot to say about that. One really effective approach is focusing on habit formation.
Habits.
Yeah, it's all about automating those productive behaviors so they become more automatic, less effortful.
Okay, but how do we actually do that?
Start small. Tiny even. There's this concept called the 2-minute rule, where you commit to doing something for just 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Seems almost too easy.
Right, but that's the point. It's about building momentum. So for example, if you're trying to get into a writing habit, your 2-minute rule might just be opening up your document and writing a single sentence.
Interesting.
And once you started, you're much more likely to keep going. Another powerful technique is using implementation intentions.
Implementation intentions, what are those?
Basically, it's about creating very specific if-then plans that link a trigger to a desired action.
Give me an example.
Sure. So instead of just vaguely saying, I'll work on my presentation later, you'd say, if it's 9 a.m., then I will work on my presentation for 1 hour at my desk.
Got it.
So you're pre-committing to a specific action tied to a specific cure. and that makes it way more likely you'll actually do it. There's also MCI, which stands for mental contrasting and implementation intentions.
MCI, that sounds intense.
It's actually pretty straightforward. It's basically mentally contrasting the positive future you want to achieve with your current reality, which can really boost your motivation before creating your if-then plan.
I like it. So we're being super specific about what we'll do and when we'll do it. What about rewards?
Rewards can be really effective too. Positive reinforcement, even in small ways, can really help solidify those good habits.
So like giving yourself a little treat after a productive work session.
Exactly. Or allowing yourself to listen to your favorite podcast only while exercising. That's called temptation bundling. You pair something you need to do with something you enjoy.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, so we've got some behavioral strategies. What about our thinking? Can we change the way we think about tasks to make us less likely to procrastinate?
Absolutely. Cognitive strategies are super important. One of the most effective is called cognitive restructuring. It's all about challenging those negative, unhelpful thoughts we have about the task.
Yeah, all those thoughts that make us want to run and hide?
Exactly. So instead of thinking, I'm going to fail this project, you could try reframing it as, I can break this down into smaller steps and tackle it one at a time.
Okay, so we're basically replacing those self-defeating thoughts with something more realistic and encouraging.
Exactly. And then there's self-compassion, which is huge. It's about being kind to yourself, especially when you do slip up. We all procrastinate sometimes. It happens. The key is to not beat yourself up about it. Just acknowledge it and move on.
That makes sense. It's like being your own cheerleader instead of your own worst critic. What about mindfulness? Does that come into play here?
It does. Mindfulness is about being present in the moment. And that can really help you recognize those procrastination urges without immediately giving in to them.
So instead of just mindlessly scrolling through social media when you feel that urge to procrastinate, you'd pause and say, okay, I'm feeling that urge to avoid this task. What can I do to stay focused?
Exactly. It's about becoming more aware of your thought patterns and behaviors so you can make a conscious choice.
Okay, that makes sense. You also shared some research on time management and productivity. Are there any specific techniques that can help with procrastination?
Yeah, there are a bunch. One popular one is the Pomodoro Technique. Have you heard of that?
Vaguely.
Basically, you work in focused 25-minute intervals separated by short breaks. It creates a sense of urgency, makes tasks feel less overwhelming, and helps prevent burnout.
Okay, that sounds doable. What about prioritizing tasks?
That's key. One helpful tool is the Eisenhower matrix. It helps you categorize tasks based on urgency and importance, so you can focus your energy on what really matters. There's also the eat the frog method. Have you heard of that one?
No. What's that about?
The idea is to tackle your most challenging or dreaded task first thing in the morning, so you get it out of the way and feel a sense of accomplishment.
Interesting. I like that. Any other tips for making those daunting tasks more approachable?
Oh yeah, breaking large tasks down into smaller, more manageable chunks is super helpful. It can make the whole thing feel less overwhelming.
So instead of thinking write a 10-page paper, you'd think write an outline, research sources, write the introduction, and so on.
Exactly. And then there's the Swiss cheese technique. You just make little bursts of progress on a task whenever you have a few minutes, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes.
That's a great idea. It makes it feel like you're constantly chipping away at it. What about deadlines? Do they play a role in procrastination?
Huge role. Having clear deadlines creates a sense of urgency, and breaking down large deadlines into smaller milestones can be super helpful too.
That's a good point. Okay, so to sum up, we've got some really great strategies here. Breaking down tasks, setting clear intentions, using the Pomodoro Technique, minimizing distractions, prioritizing tasks ruthlessly, building those small positive habits, practicing self-compassion, and challenging those negative thoughts. It's a lot.
It is, but remember, it's about finding what works best for you. Experiment, try different things, and don't beat yourself up if you slip up. Procrastination is a habit, and habits take time to change.
Right? It's a process, not a quick fix. Is there anything else that the research highlights when it comes to overcoming procrastination?
Yeah, one thing I really wanted to mention is the importance of motivation, and specifically the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation.
What's the difference?
So intrinsic motivation is when you're doing something because you enjoy it or because it's personally meaningful to you. Extrinsic motivation is when you're doing something because of external rewards or pressures, like getting a good grade or avoiding punishment.
So intrinsic motivation is like doing something for the love of it, and extrinsic motivation is like doing something because you have to.
Exactly. And research has shown that intrinsic motivation is much more powerful and sustainable when it comes to beating procrastination.
That makes sense. When you're genuinely interested in something, it's easier to stay focused and engaged.
Definitely. So one of the keys to overcoming procrastination is to tap into your intrinsic motivation. Connect to your values. Find ways to make the task more enjoyable or meaningful for you.
How do we do that?
Well, one way is to set achievable and meaningful goals, goals that really resonate with you. Make sure they're aligned with your values and your long-term vision.
So think big picture, but start small.
Exactly. And remember, it's okay to adjust your goals as you go. Life happens, things change.
That's a great reminder. It can be really discouraging when you set these huge, ambitious goals and then life gets in the way.
Absolutely. It's all about finding that sweet spot between the challenge and achievability and being flexible.
Okay, so we've talked about the psychology of procrastination. We've talked about behavioral strategies, cognitive strategies, time management. Is there anything else we need to consider?
Yeah, I think it's important to talk about the role of our environment. Our surroundings can have a huge impact on our ability to focus and get things done.
So what kind of environment is best for beating procrastination?
Well, first of all, minimize distractions as much as possible. That means turning off notifications, putting your phone on silent, maybe even using a website blocker if you need to. Create a workspace that's conducive to focus. Make it organized, comfortable, inviting.
So declutter your desk, close those extra tabs on your computer.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of your social environment either. Surrounding yourself with people who support your goals and encourage you can make a big difference.
Yeah, having an accountability partner could be huge.
It can. And just being aware of the people you spend time with. Do they inspire you? Do they challenge you? Or do they drag you down?
That's such a good point. We really do absorb the energy of the people around us.
We do. And finally, there's something to be said for structure. Having a clear routine, a designated workspace, and well-defined tasks can actually be really helpful in reducing procrastination.
Interesting. So sometimes a little bit of structure can actually be freeing.
Exactly. It takes away some of the decision fatigue and makes it easier to just get started.
So to wrap up our deep dive, we've covered a lot of ground. We talked about the psychology of procrastination. We looked at behavioral strategies like habit formation and implementation intentions. We talked about cognitive strategies like cognitive restructuring and self-compassion. We explored time management techniques like the Pomodoro Technique and breaking down tasks. We even talked about the importance of motivation and environment. It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has, and I hope it's given our listeners some actionable insights into how to finally conquer procrastination.
I think it has. So for you, our listener, we challenge you to choose one small, evidence-based change from our deep dive and implement it today. What's one tiny action you can take right now to shift your relationship with your tasks?
That's a great question to ponder.
It is. Thanks for diving deep with us.
My pleasure.
Until next time.